Hey guys, I wanted to make this video to share with you guys a little bit more about my process, specifically my sketching techniques, how I get to this result in just a couple of days, and things that I'm looking for, and basically how I'm approaching certain things. Before we get to the more complex stuff, I wanted to make this video to just take a step back and give you guys a little bit more, just an introduction to ZBrush in case you're not super familiar, but more specifically introduction to my workflow and how do I work, and things that I have in my hands here to make my life a little bit easier. So first of all, if you'll see, my UI is a little bit different, not too different than a lot of different users out there have a very complex UI. I've been using this UI for quite some time now. I basically have my lighting here and a couple brushes that I like the most. And you can easily customize your UI. ZBrush gives you a lot of tools to just drag and drop things that you use more often into spaces that you want. You can also create extra tabs and things to put stuff in it. So I'll share with you guys mine, but mine is very simple. I think the secret to the speed and the workflow is mainly on the hotkeys. So I have my brushes into my lower keys here, C, V, and you see my brushes kind of swapping as we talk. And if you're going to watch the videos, you're probably never going to see me going into the brush section and selecting a brush. I have all my most used brushes here, which is clay, move, inflate, standard, and then damp standard. And the ones that I have here in the corner are the ones that are very useful, but I don't use it so much, but I do have them available here. And I will share with you guys my hotkeys as part of this, so you guys can start with that. You can also just set up your own hotkeys. Again, it's very easy. ZBrush, I think it's Control. If you hit Control Alt and click on something, it will ask you to assign a key to this click. So you can do that very easy with the things that you like the most. So with that out of the way, before you guys get started with these videos, I want to make sure you are very comfortable with the tools and how to sculpt in ZBrush. You will find that technically there's a lot to go deep and learning within ZBrush, but in reality you don't need much to just get to a sculpt, something that you use on a 2D sketch or later in 3D when you're going to start doing retopology and get this ready for a game, a cinematic, whatever is the case. Basically the sculpting is the most important thing. So I'm just going to erase this. I'm going to deselect. I'm going to erase this canvas. And I'm just going to start with primitives. And as you know, everything in 3D starts with primitives. ZBrush gives you a good range of primitives. I'm just going to start with a cube, and I'm going to put this, hit edit so I can rotate. Basically, I cannot edit this cube because it's not a polymesh 3D. All we have to do is come here and make it a polymesh, and now I can move it around and do whatever I want. If I hit X, I turn on symmetry. It's also here on transform. And now I can move it with symmetry. And what I want you guys, let me put like a white background so it's easier to see what's happening. What I want you guys to get used to, especially if you're starting, if you're a beginner, get used to the navigation, how to move things around, how to zoom in, zoom out. And basically I'm gonna turn this cube into a sphere. And again, that's what I'm saying, like it doesn't really matter as much with what you start. I'm gonna show you there's different ways to approach a lot of different things. But what you do need to be good at is just getting to a shape, manipulating the forms to get to a shape that you want. Doesn't matter what you start with, and you see that throughout the videos. So now that I have this sphere here, I can easily start manipulating and creating something out of it. What you realize is that once I start moving it around, the mesh, the topology gets stretched. How we get around this is ZBrush is Dynamesh. You go down here in geometry, and if you hit this Dynamesh button, you would see that it calculates the topology and it calculates the mesh and recreates the topology on top of that. So I can easily start pulling it and control click, control drag, and recalculate the Dynamesh. And with that, we can make basically whatever we want out of this. Now, it is very complex to control a lot of shapes doing this. So you will find things that maybe you want to start with the leg, and then you just start with the primitive and then merge it down. So what I'm going to show you guys now is just different ways to approach certain things. Let's say we wanted to make a horn, right? Which is kind of what we're doing here. So I can mask this. If I control, click, and mask, now I invert the selection and I can just move this, kind of extrude this out, right? Now I have a shape, which it looks like a cylinder, and I can start creating a horn out of this and start manipulating the shape. What I do recommend is that you start very low res. You know, a lot of people want to go high res, especially when you're starting it. You want to go really low res at the beginning so you can easily, you know, so you can manipulate this surface a little bit easier. So as we do this, it's easy to create like a little horn, you know, and get it into shape. Another way you could create this, you could just insert another primitive. So if I come here on the brush, insert primitives, and I'll grab a cylinder, you know, and I can insert this over here, right? That's another way to approach this. Now, you see it's two different meshes. If I dynamesh it, it will merge it together. So it's basically the same thing that we did. We masked and then we extrude it, and then we have this shape. Another way that you can do this, it's simply just like we did at the beginning, just pull this around, dynamesh, pull it around, dynamesh it. That's another way to you know, to get to a shape. Another way you could do it is also duplicate this. So if I'm gonna go here in subtools, I'm duplicating this subtool, and I'm gonna, you know, transform this into the shape that we want. You know, whatever it is. Like I'm keeping it very, very loose here. Dynamesh it. I'm just gonna delete this extra stuff. But basically, this is just another technique that you need to have on your mindset when you're sculpting it. Like, what is the fastest way to get to a certain result? That's what we're getting at. But I could just get this shape in here, and then once we, you know, we can keep it separate, or once we merge it down, so we merge it together into the same subtool. Now, if I dynamesh it, it's going to weld it together, right? So what we're getting into is basically you need to have all these tools available. So when you are sketching something, then you need to think, what's the fastest way that I can get to a certain result, right? I don't want to be thinking about what I'm going to do next or how I'm going to approach certain things. I just basically do it. Like, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about how I'm going to get to a certain result. Doing it at this phase, you know, will get you to the result faster. That's one of the kind of the tips that I have for if you're sketching or trying to get faster. Get the shape in there and then start manipulating it into the shape that you want. What I do want to avoid is starting to append a lot of primitives. That's what takes a long time. So let's say from here that this guy was gonna have an earring, right? Like I could come in and just insert a tube, or I can kind of come in here, get a ring, make it a polymesh, append into the shape, getting it into place, right? This is something that you might have to do, right? It's not that easy to create a ring out of nothing, right? Like, but this kind of takes me a little while to get. What I do want you guys to think about is like, what if we just make a ring out of this mask and kind of extract it? Like, so I extracted a ring. Of course, like this is a very simple shape that you can just get it in place. But you see me doing a lot of this, and it's a lot faster, right? I'm not worrying too much about the quality of that tube. I can get it to quality, again, going back into like, make sure you can manipulate the shape enough to create whatever you want out of nothing, right? Out of like any given shape. And it will be a lot faster. So you see me doing a lot of that. If I want to do a body, instead of just starting with a new primitive, I would just get this, you know, and transform this into some sort of a shape. I'm going to delete this and dynamesh it. And once I dynamesh it, it will close that gap. And from here, I can start manipulating it into, you know, the shape that I want. And I can turn this into a shoulder. You know, I can start looking for opportunities to speed up. And again, it could get very messy, especially if you're starting. That's why I recommend you guys do quick studies, anatomy studies, get good at anatomy. What I'm doing here is kind of advanced for someone that never had any experience with anatomy or never studied that. What I do want you guys to do is just kind of start simple and start sculpting like a skull, an animal skull. I have a lot of tutorials that you guys can look for that will help you with that basic anatomy stuff. Like how would you do, and again, this is very simple shape, but I can easily turn this into a skull, for example, right? Because I've done it enough and I know where to go to make a skull. So I could start manipulating the shape and drawing, and you can kind of see like I keep it very loose to start visualizing the shape. And once I see it, I can kind of move it into place. Different than traditional sculpting or even drawing, where you kind of like, you know, your every brush matters, or you're trying to find the shape on the first attempt. Here we are just kind of playing around and start kind of seeing the shape come to life. And that's why I like to design things in 3D. I'm just gonna increase a little bit the resolution here, but again, keeping it very low. That's why I like to sketch things in 3D, because it's easy for me to play around with shapes and create something that maybe is different than what I was thinking, or I start seeing something that, you know, that I wasn't trying to achieve, and then it just goes from there. So I can start to get, you know, out of that, just playing around with the brushes and start to get something that kind of feels nice. And you can kind of see that I'm keeping it very low. I don't want to go high res here. And once we start getting a shape that we like, then we can, you know, start adding more topology. So it may seem that I'm just kind of going crazy here with the shapes, but again, this is all coming from that skull, and then I can design on top. That's why I don't recommend, if you don't have that experience or that, if you don't have that knowledge, to just start doing things like this. Go and start sculpting, you start studying anatomy, start studying skulls, and try to replicate skulls first, so you have that basic knowledge. And again, in just a matter of minutes, we can achieve something that kind of feels nice. Then after that, we can either up the resolution of the Dynamesh, or we can start, you know, do a Z-remesher, so we can have a clean topology. You know, if I wanted to kind of split this into two, I could just hide it and then do a split hidden right here. You know, we have two. Once I Dynamesh, it's going to close those gaps, and I can start working from that. Dynamesh it again. I can start working from this. You know, I can open the jaw, start working on the teeth. I'm just going to pull this out. And again, keeping it very loose, and that's why, especially in this video, what I want to approach with you guys is how, you know, I do what I do for certain things to keep it fast and still achieve the result that we want. And then later I could easily start cleaning up this. After that is just way more of a technical process of like cleaning this mesh up. But now what we're worrying about is just more the design and how we're gonna, you know, get to the sculpt part of it. How we're gonna get to the design before we start worrying about the technical aspects. And if you're just worrying more about if you're just a concept artist, if you just worry more about getting a good base to paint on top, honestly, this is all you need to know. Just getting in there and sculpting something to be a good base so you could use. This is probably all you have to worry about at this point. Of course, you can get a lot more complex with the things that you could do, but basically studying sculpting, like understanding the form, and then keeping it loose so you can achieve a result that you want. That's what this is about, and that's what we're going to explore in this next videos, where we get a lot more complex with the shapes that we're going to do. We're going to talk about fabrics, clothing. We're going to talk about, you know, skulls and faces, and the treatment part of it, like how we get then to this final detail with alphas. But honestly, this is all you need to know to be able to follow along and understand everything that I did in this project and how I got to that final result. So let's get started and start having some fun with the other characters.